Right. And so the way I think about that in a in a business context, right, in a workplace context, right, is the push is like, do this thing and I'll give you more money. Do this thing and I'll give you a higher title. Do this thing and I will, right, and you will, or fear. Do this thing or this bad thing will happen. Do this thing or we'll all be out of a job, or you'll get a bad review, or other people will get promoted instead of you, or this other group will be more successful than we are, right? There's all these external motivations that are the easier ones to provide as a leader, as part of an organization, right? The challenge is figuring out what's the intrinsic motivation, right? if people are if people are motivated by money, great. That's a thing. That's a lever you can pull. But why are they motivated by money? Like, having money
Hmm.
piled up in a bank isn't really that valuable to most people that aren't Warren Buffett, right? Most people want money so that they can do something for their family, for their lives, for their future, right? Most people, fear motivation is because they already believe the fear, because they've had a bad experience, or because they are really, they're risk averse or something like that. But that's still a push. That's still going to move them away from something. They're not going to run really hard towards something unless it's something that they intrinsically want to accomplish, unless they feel intrinsically enjoy being good at it, or they intrinsically enjoy getting the output, or they can see themselves progressing in their lives towards something that they want. And if you can tease those things out, then you've got a lot more power. Then you've got people that will work infinitely hard and will go do the splits up on the third level cupboard to get the secret cookie stash out, right? without even asking. Just let them know that it's there, and they'll just go do amazing things to get there. And that's the fun part, right? That's the fun part as a leader. If you get to the point where you sort of get the unlock of like, oh, I can just lay this challenge out, and somebody will be like, oh, thank you for the challenge, and go run really hard at it because it's the right challenge for them at the right time, then you're succeeding, they're succeeding, and everything seems less frustrating.
Yeah, so I want to bring in a good example here. Those some of you may know our third, every once in a while, co-host who also founded WonderTour, Derrick
Our
Cobb.
dear friend Derrick.
Yes, our good friend Derrick. And Derrick has a good example of this, right? So Derrick, at one point, working with some of his team members, Derrick has a team member who is extremely competent and super skilled and all about achieving results, like loves to be able to deliver and show value and
Mm-hmm.
push the organization forward. And Derrick, as the mentor, was trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I leverage this to get that person to be motivated to do the same thing around their relationships? How do I get them
Hmm.
to be motivated towards to build these great relationships instead? And it's understanding that person's motivation. It's understanding that that person gets a lot out of setting a goal and achieving it, right? They're a driver, and so they want to achieve goals. They want goals that other people, that are challenging. They really want challenging goals, goals that other people think they can't achieve. And so when you start to set that up and instead you reframe it as a pull mechanism, not necessarily as a chip, like, oh, you can't do this. Not at all, because
Right.
that's rarely the motivator that we're looking for, but more
Right.
so as a, if we could do this, it would be so cool. It would unlock this level
Right.
of vision or ideal state in the future if we could do this. And this is actually just as important as all that technical stuff that we're doing, as all that engineering work that we're doing.
And you can be the one that can do it for us, right? You can be the dragon warrior in this context, right? No, absolutely, right? Yeah, I've worked with team members who their intrinsic motivation was they hated being bored and they loved solving problems, right? And so you could be coming off the end of a 6 week long arduous project, and you'd have an hour of downtime, and you're like, hey, I've got this new problem. And they're like, oh, thank you, cool, I've got a new thing to work on, right? Like the thing that they feared was being bored, was not having a cool thing to do. And so, like, as soon as you present them with a cooler thing, to go run at it. I've worked with other team members who were very process oriented, who hated having to improvise, who hated when everything was an exception. And if you present them with like, okay, let's sit down together and like actually codify this, and then we'll start to work with everybody else to make this the way we do things, like, they'll just run with it. Like, okay, great, fabulous. I will be the person that figures out the details of the process and writes it down. Like, that's what greatness looks like to them. But those are intrinsic. It's difficult to teach somebody to be highly process oriented. Often that's an intrinsic attribute. But if you can find those people and like, okay, this is the flavor of greatness that's right for you. All right, let's see how we can align that with the stuff that we want.
Oh, you can come back later to talk about that one, Brian, how to teach
Yes.
somebody to be more process oriented, because I've had some experience with that. I've had to teach myself to be very process oriented because it is not my nature. I am much more of a go with the flow and don't have super clear structures for things. So there are absolutely ways to ingrain that mindset into people. I just want to finish with one thing in this practical application. I think this has been super helpful even to me to kind of unpack some of this, but you mentioned at the beginning the traditional means that in corporations or even in just like the basic way that we think about what people are motivated by, sometimes those are too thin. Sometimes
Right.
those are not the root of their motivation. The typical, oh, they're motivated by the chip on their shoulder. Oh, they're motivated by money. They're motivated by title. Those are kind of surface deep. And a lot of times in my experience, that's as deep as we go when we talk about improving somebody's development.
Mm-hmm.
How do we go deeper? Because that's what Shifu does. He goes a little bit deeper than that. He says, okay, well, I have to actually study Poe. If I don't study Poe, I'm not going to be able to learn more about what makes him tick, because Poe's not going to just tell you necessarily that food is his motivator. You got to spend time with him. You got to build trust with him so that he's transparent and vulnerable with you so that you can understand what truly motivates them. Because in my experience, that person who's motivated by money is not motivated by money. They're motivated by some past experience of insecurity. They're motivated by their family, right? They're motivated by some dream that they have that they want to achieve, that they believe money is the key to. And if you can get past that and instead understand what is at the root of it, suddenly the money thing becomes a little bit less significant, and that person can actually get more fulfillment, and they can be more motivated each day to walk in, to learn, to become the master themselves.
100%. No, that's awesome. And how do you get there, right? How do you get that level of understanding is exactly what we saw in these episodes, right? You have at least one really honest conversation, right? How are you going to turn me into what I want? I don't actually know, but I think we're both committed to doing it, so let's do it. Let's do it together, right? Getting to the point where you can have that conversation and being willing on both sides to be a little bit vulnerable about, like, I don't have the answers and I'm not satisfied with the current state of the world, but maybe we have a shared mission, maybe we have some shared goals, and we're certainly all in this together, so let's go be as awesome as we can together. That's a silly lesson to learn from a panda. But
great,
nonetheless valid.
Yeah, this is WonderTour, right? We want to learn lessons from unlikely places, and Kung Fu Panda, just another opportunity.